All right, so before we get started on our presentation for the day, I just wanted to share a bit of our background and what we do here at the Grand Traverse Conservation District, and then I will be handing it off to Carol to get us started. So the Grand Traverse Conservation District was established in 1941 and historically was started as a valuable tool during the Dust Bowl era for farmers to learn better cultivation practices. Today, the same idea is still heard throughout our mission, while at the same time it's been expanded to include a wide range of programming, including our Boardman River Nature Center, in order to instill and promote the idea of conservation into all generations. We were previously an unfunded entity until 2018 when the people of Grand Traverse County voted to give us a millage, which has helped us tremendously in our day-to-day operations. So we're very grateful for that. So we're really blessed to have our district offices housed within the Boardman River Nature Center on Grand Traverse County's Natural Education Reserve property. This is where most of our work stems from, housing my program, MEEP, the Invasive Species Network, Parklands, as well as other programs. Our education department operates almost exclusively from the Nature Center, which includes camps and field trips for area youth to partake in and indulge themselves in nature and conservation by utilizing the several miles of trails located right here directly behind our Nature Center, right along the Boardman River. So some of the things that we do in line with our mission is restoration through management of invasive species with the Northwest Michigan Invasive Species Network, instill and foster exploration of our natural world through our Parklands program, which features 3,000 acres of public parklands throughout the county. And we also provide technical assistance to agricultural producers in Northwest Michigan through MEEP, primarily by working with farms to help them mitigate and prevent environmental risks on their farms, primarily to surface and groundwater. So that's my role here at the district. Another facet of our work is restoration and stewardship of the Boardman River bottomlands and its associated watershed, following the removal of 3 hydroelectric dams. Our district forester is Cameron Ross, who works through the Forestry Assistance Program to provide assistance to private landowners on woodland ownership. And then we also have produce safety guidelines that one of our Michigan on-farm produce safety technician, Michelle Jacobs, works with farmers within 5 counties out of the Manistee office, but she is often here in our office as well. So those are our programs. And there are a few ways in which the community can get involved with our work and our mission, such as volunteering at the Nature Center as a docent, promoting sustainable and responsible enjoyment of the outdoors, or participating in upcoming district events and programs, all of which can be found on our website under events and are currently subject to change in venue, just due to COVID. Another way to become involved is to sign up as a trail steward. These are our eyes on the trails that report down trees, erosion issues, and other parkland concerns. Lastly, considering donating to GTCD on our website or becoming a friend of the district by visiting natureiscalling.org/support. So that just about wraps up everything I've got to say about the Conservation District. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for participating. And if you have any questions about the Conservation District, please feel free to send an email to info@gtcd.org. And from here, I will pass it along to Carol. Carol?
I don't see her on the participant list.
She might have had an issue with her connection, so we will just give her a second to re-log in, and then she can get us started.
Yeah, she said she's having a tech problem on her end.
Okay.
Well, Patty, do you want to say a few words about the polls group, and then we'll move on?
Sure. Thanks, Ralph. Yeah, Carol and I got together last year. This is our second series for polls, and we're so fortunate to have Ralph join our team from Runny Lake. So we've joined between Spider Lake and Runny Lake to put the educational series on. We found in talking with different riparians, there were different issues on the lake, the shorelands, shorelines, and all had a common thread. So we tried to pull in the questions and concerns and come up with a program, and we garnered speakers and wonderful places like the Conservation District that would help us disseminate our information out to people all over that signed up for this. And we were so fortunate to have, like I say, Ralph, and with his connections, all of our speakers for this year. And so we look forward to doing it again next year. We were able to do it in face and in person, but of course with COVID, we pushed on and found a way to do it this year by Zoom. So yeah, so this is our last one, and we thank everyone for attending them. Without you, we wouldn't keep pushing to make more series. You give us the drive to do that. And anything or any ideas, let us know. So with that, I don't know where Carol is, but I think, Ralph, are you up on the next one to introduce the speaker?
Sounds great, Patty. Thank you, Patty. So I'm pleased to be part of the 2020 poll series this year. I've met and I've worked with many special people in my career. We have three very talented people scheduled to educate us during the 2020 polls. So far this summer, we learned about aquatic plants from Dr. Joe Latimore, inland lake fisheries habitats and fisheries from Dr. Joe Noner. And today we will learn about how to protect our inland lake shorelines and shorelands from Erick Elgin. Erick is a limnologist and water resource educator with Michigan State Extension, the Owego County Extension Office. His main responsibilities are to promote and research the wise use, protection, and restoration of our freshwater systems. Erick is currently the vice chair of the Michigan Natural Shoreline Partnership and is the president of the Michigan chapter of the North American Lake Management Society. Erick is also on the coordinating team for the MyCorps Cooperative Lakes Monitoring Program, and he coordinates the professional contractors training for the MNSP. Erick has an MS degree in aquatic ecology from the University of Calgary and a BS in natural resource management and water resource management from the University of Minnesota. Please help us provide a warm Northern Michigan welcome to Erick Elgin. Erick, the virtual stage is yours.
Excellent. Thanks, Ralph, for that nice introduction. And, you know, it's great. Ralph is a great asset to Michigan's lakes. He had a impactful career with the state and working on lakes for many years. And it's great that he's up in an area and continuing to protect our lakes and move everything forward. I'm just gonna get my screen to share.
While you're doing that, Erick, I just wanted to mention to our participants, if you wouldn't mind keeping your mic, your audio muted and your video also off, just so it is fewer distractions for the presentation. And then in addition, for those that might have logged in a little bit later, there is opportunity for questions throughout the presentation, so you feel free to type those questions in the chat box and I'll do my best to relay them to Erick. We will have some time at the end as well to ask some questions. So with that, sorry to interrupt, Erick, but Just wanted to remind everyone.
No problem. And are you guys seeing my title slide?
Yes, we are.
Perfect. Okay, yes. So again, I don't mind being interrupted at all. In fact, because this is a very large topic, protecting Michigan's inland lake shorelines and shorelands. And so within 1 hour to cover everything in detail, or something that might be specifically impacting your lake or the lakes within that region, I'm happy to answer more to make this presentation more meaningful to the lakes in this region. So today's presentation is pretty broad. We're covering shorelines in general and what their function and services are to us. We're going to cover broadly our impacts. You know, what do we do to negatively impact this area and then therefore the lake? But then we're going to dwell on that a little bit, but then we're going to move on to talk about the many different things that an individual can do on their property or within their community to protect or improve their lake. So shorelines are dynamic systems that provide critical habitat, reduce runoff, limit erosion, help maintain water quality, and a whole lot more. You know, when we look at this, it's beautiful. Who doesn't want a loon on their lake? It's a spectacular site and very special that draws not only, or I guess, fully critters that include us. And the diversity is pretty amazing. Here in this picture is a belted kingfisher that requires intact shorelines to exist. When we see development occur and too much development where lots of vegetation is removed, we also see the removal of this species. We have species that depend on this shoreline for the land and the water. So here's a turtle, for example, that for part of its life cycle, for example, laying eggs, it needs dry land. But then for a large chunk of its life, it needs to be in the water. So it needs an unimpeded barrier or just unimpeded zone where they can enter and leave the lake. Then we have special amphibians out there. This is a bullfrog where again, once again, they require kind of that combination approach and vegetation within their habitat. And of course, you know, we have many different insects. Here pictured is a damselfly, which my little one, I have a 2.5-year-old who just loves these, especially the blue ones. I just wanted to mention just a little bit about the diversity and why. So we actually see, if we look at a landscape, we actually see more diversity at shorelines. And this is because of multiple things. It's the edge of two larger, broader ecosystems from the land zone to the aquatic zone. So in this transition zone where the shoreline, shoreland exist, we have a combination of species that utilize land and a combination of species that are aquatic. And so they all mix in this transition zone. But then also this transition zone is an area of disturbance, of natural disturbance. Water level fluctuations, for example, change seasonally, as many of you know. And those conditions actually create species that are specifically adapted for that disturbance, and you can get some really unique species. And one of those unique species is us. We are drawn to the shoreline. We are drawn to lakes. They're beautiful. They give us a sense of place. The poles is originating in northern lower Michigan. That's up north. And being by cedar trees that are angled into the lake, looking out at a sunset, sunrise, it really draws us in, and we love our lakes. What's unfortunate though is that we have seen a trend all across the upper Midwest and other places where there's lots of lakes, but the upper Midwest with its large amounts of glacial lakes, where development pressures have increased. We've moved from maybe the summer cottage that has still a lot of habitat in place, a small home that maybe doesn't have a large driveway or a a shed or anything like that. And it's only habited for a brief amount of time, but we've moved now, or the trend is moving where we're moving from seasonal to full time. And so what we see here is not unusual. We have larger roads. We have development not just at the shoreline, but we have development deeper into the shoreland. And what I mean by shoreland is that the shoreland kind of includes the lake zone, the shoreline, and the upland area. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that. But so we have development away from the lake a lot more, and then right on the lake, our homes have gotten larger. We've added additional buildings because we're living there full time. A lot of vegetation has been removed from trees, shrubs, herbaceous species like flowers, sedges, and grasses, and we've replaced them with lawns. And this has been the trend that we're seeing. So for example, here's a study from 2012 in Michigan, and what they did here was they drew an imaginary line around the Gaylord, and south is what they're considering the south. So those are the white bars. Our lakes south of Gaylord, and the black is north of there, which includes the UP. What we have is the predicted amount of lakes with different development intensities. So 0 homes per kilometer is saying the undeveloped lakes. This 1 to 10 homes per kilometer is more lower or moderate development. And then over here on this side, we have over 10 homes per kilometer, which is considered high development, intensive development. And isn't it amazing to see this line right here, this bar here? It's predicted that around 70% of the lakes in Michigan, south of Gaylord, are intensely developed. Here's another depiction where we're expanding it more to shoreland disturbance. And so this map is from the Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership. And if you're curious about this nifty program, type in the Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership. It's not program, I put that in there, partnership, into Google, and you'll be able to find that. But what they did here is, so what we're seeing is the red indicates lakes with high shoreline disturbance. And then we have that orangish peach, which is medium, and blue being low. You can see there's a lot of red throughout the state, a lot less in the UP. But to talk about what do they mean by disturbance, because it's important that we don't just think about our disturbance on the shoreline proper, but also into the upland. And so this depicts the shoreland disturbance, which is the proportion of shoreland area with urban and agricultural land cover within 100 meters of the shoreline. And so what that's saying is, is within 100 meters of the shoreline, how much development has occurred either agriculturally or residential or commercially. One of the major ways we impair shorelines and shorelands is really by the removal of vegetation. And that's really important to think about because our natural shorelines have kind of these, we can think of them as 3 tiers of vegetation, and all of them are very important and they work amongst each other. So we have our upland zone where we have a tree canopy, a shrub understory, and herbaceous plants, all growing in the upland where it's typically drier conditions. And then we have this transition zone, which is more about that shoreline where sometimes it's wet, sometimes it's drier, or sometimes it's moist. And then we look at the plants that are also found in the in-lake zone. So this is more of our aquatic plants, the emergent, floating, and submerged that you would have learned from Joe Latimore's presentation earlier this year. But these this complex of vegetation, this tiered complex of vegetation does a whole lot for lakes. They stabilize the banks and lake sediments. So they keep the sediments from being resuspended, and they hold the soil in place on land. And they do that because of their stems themselves, but then also their complex root systems that some of them are very deep or some of them are very dense. They also, and that's really important because sedimentation into lakes is a big problem, but then also those sediments often can hold other contaminants, one of them being a pollution called phosphorus, which is a really important nutrient to plant and algae growth in lakes. This vegetation also absorbs nutrients because they need them to grow. They change the soil chemistry, which can keep things in place, nutrients in place. They provide that valuable habitat to all those different lake inhabitants that I mentioned in prior slides. And they reduce runoff, and that's really important because as we put homes on our property, on these shorelands, having that really increases runoff, and having vegetation in place can slow that down. And runoff often contains a lot of different pollutants in there that we wouldn't want in the lake. So here's not an uncommon site where we have a home. The vegetation has been changed. It's not just that vegetation has removed, it's been changed to more of a monoculture with lawn grass. So shrubs, you don't see many shrubs here. There's some trees that remain on part of the property, but with lawn grass down to the water's edge, which can cause lots of issues. So broadly speaking across the landscape, this is a study that was done in Wisconsin, looked at what has happened to the shoreland plants. And so the green are undeveloped lakes, and then they also looked at developed lakes of various development densities. And they found that the tree canopy is definitely reduced, but what was more dramatic is the reduction of shrubs. And this kind of makes sense because shrubs are typically somewhat shorter and they can block our view. Trees you can trim and still see the lake, but shrubs are less tolerable to our needs. And what about the plants in the lake proper? You can see very dramatic change in percent cover in front of developed and undeveloped lakes. So again, the green is undeveloped and the yellow is developed. And so we have a lot less emergent, a lot less floating, and a lot less submerged. And when we talk about vegetation removal, it also we can extend that to dead vegetation. So historically, lakes here in Michigan would have a tremendous amount of down woody debris is what we call it. So trees that have fallen in the lake and then remain there. You probably would have, I didn't see Joe Noner's presentation, but he probably would have talked a lot about the benefits of this type of habitat, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about it. But what we've seen with as the development intensity increases, so from undeveloped to intensely developed, we actually see a lot less wood in the water. So there's been the activity of removing the downed trees that have fallen in the lake instead of leaving them there. And all this has had a dramatic impact. So again, we don't just remove the vegetation, have bare soil. Instead, we put in lawn grass. And lawns aren't the best landscaping option for lakes. There's a lot of erosion issues. They don't have the root mass that goes deep enough or are dense and strong enough near the surface to mitigate the impacts of waves. And so even if your lake is fairly calm, there's still wave action. And if you don't have the roots of plants or aquatic plants in the water to absorb that wave energy, you can get a lot of erosion, as you can see in this picture here. There's also little wildlife value, so we get a loss of species. They can be a source of nutrients. So if you are fertilizing with phosphorus and nitrogen, which are very common nutrients to fertilize your lawn with, there's ample evidence that those nutrients in many cases can enter into the lake. Also, these plants don't help the most with infiltration, and in fact, they can get lawns can get kind of compacted, which increases runoff. And then I like to add this, lawn impacts is also, it impacts us. We have to mow them, which is a loss of our leisure time. We live on these lakes because we love to enjoy and relax, and now here we have to still mow our lawns if you have them, so it's a loss of leisure time. But anyway, so what has occurred is that now we've removed the vegetation, we put in lawns, we start seeing erosion. So what happens is that the natural reaction is we need to stop this erosion. And so one of the classic actions would be rock riprap. Well, rock riprap has been historically implemented on a 2-to-1 slope, so it's fairly wall-like. And then also this is huge stones, and this has dramatic impacts. So yes, the soil is no longer eroding, but this also changes the wave energy and can scour the bottom of the lake. And so you actually get sediment movement and resuspension in the lake proper. And this causes issues from impacts to fish and wildlife, to the release of phosphorus into the water column. It also removes habitat. We often say, does this shoreline pass the turtle test? And what we mean by the turtle test is, can a turtle from the water enter onto land to lay its eggs? And for example, this shoreline that I'm showing you does not pass the turtle test. A turtle would not be able to move up those rocks to deposit their eggs on shore. So it becomes a barrier to wildlife. And also, just another impact is that it costs a lot of money. But this really creates a disconnect from the lake to the upland. Another common action is a seawall. So this is quite the dramatic seawall, but this does many of the same things that I just described as an impact of rock riprap. And here's a nice cross-section of a lake. What we have here is our upland zone. We have our littoral zone, which is an area where we can have aquatic plants rooted to the bottom, and then we have the lake, the deeper parts of the lake. What we do here's kind of just a quick animation of what we expect from seawalls. So a seawall gets put in typically in the toe of the slope where erosion is occurring. We backfill to that so we can have a flat lawn or to remediate other issues. But now this is where, when wave energy comes in, instead of being able to dissipate up the shoreline, it hits and scours. And so you actually get scouring, which removes habitat and all the other things I mentioned earlier. Also, one of the negatives of seawalls is that there is a impact potentially to your neighbors. So in this picture, what we're seeing here is a seawall. This person on the side of this other landowner doesn't have a seawall. But just like I mentioned, there's scouring that happens this way. There's also something called wave flanking. And this is where the energy actually builds and starts to cut into the other person's shoreline. And you can get some very big issues because it's concentrated wave energy flanking over to the side and eroding. This can sometimes often cause people to a cascading effect where one person gets a seawall and then multiple people get seawalls because of that connection. So this is quite the figure, but what I'll just kind of briefly tell you some take-home messages to look at. So this is a great study by the USGS, the United States Geological Survey in Wisconsin in 2006. What they were looking at is multiple different kinds of nutrients. So ammonia, nitrogen, that's a nitrogen. This is another type of nitrogen. This is another type of nitrogen. And then here are the two broad types of phosphorus. And what we have here is they looked at the runoff and the nutrients within that runoff from lawns to woods. And what I just say, as you look across, oh, and then I'll say this, the purple represents maximum, and then the yellow is the average that they found coming off. And so the take-home message is there's a lot more nutrients within the runoff of lawns compared to the runoff from a wooded lot. You know, this is the dramatic one here where they were looking at nitrate, which easily moves through groundwater into the lake. And what we have here is on a lawn, a lot higher amount of nutrients exported in that runoff water, either on maximum or on average compared to what we would have on runoff coming from a wooded lot. And that goes the same with phosphorus. So total phosphorus is all the different types of phosphorus and particulate phosphorus and dissolved phosphorus together. And as you can see, much more. And although this may seem like a little amount, a little difference, a little bit more phosphorus can create a whole lot more issues within a lake. And stormwater or runoff can hold a lot more than just nutrients. It can contain pesticides, oils, metals, salt, bacteria that can harm us, trash, yard waste, and sediment, and a whole lot more. There can be quite a bit of material that the runoff water can contain that can impact the lakes. Lots of this also is because we have impermeable surfaces. So when water falls onto the roof, it has nowhere to go but running off. And if it's running off onto lawn might not be the best place for it to soak in. And so it scoots off and runoff and enters our water bodies. Something I'd just like to mention, because it's becoming a more hot topic, even though we've been talking about it for a long time, is salt. We salt our roads to stay safe from slippage during winter time for ice. The problem is that chloride can really build up. So sodium chloride is salt. Chloride can really build up in our lakes and can start to increase and create a more saline environment, which can be quite a problem. And that's from putting on for year after year after year in large amounts to our landscape around our lakes. So a take-home message, which we all know this, but it's a good reminder. What we do on land impacts lakes. And it's not just what we do on the shoreline proper, it's what we do in this buffer zone, it's what we do in the upland areas where we live, and then I guess even in the lake, if you think of the bottomlands as what we do on land impacts lakes. And just to show something that is quite interesting, and the change that we've created to just hammer this home about the amount of change, the amazing amount of change that we've done on lakes. Here's an image of Gun Lake in Michigan. And I just wanted to say this is courtesy of the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy. They did a lot of work and put these slides together. They're great. So here's a recent image in 2014. As you can see, the lake is fairly developed all the way around. And we even have some canal systems that increase the amount of development that can occur on this lake. So now here is a historic image of the lake in 1938. What we can see is a large wetland complex here. And actually the wetland actually is shallow enough where it goes out and there's probably an emergent type marsh here. We have a river system and we have marshland all the way around. So there's quite an amount of undeveloped shoreline. There is some development occurring already. And as you can see, there's already farming that has occurred within the lake shed or the watershed around the lake. Let's zoom in. So we're going back to that north part of the lake. As you can see, I'll just mention this is a marsh habitat here. And this is 1938, but now we're going to show an overlay with what has occurred to 2014. Pretty dramatic. I'll show that again, and maybe I'll train the eye to maybe look right over here. So this is where the wetland has been channelized and we have built on it. Here's the south shore of Gun Lake from 1938 to 2014. Very dramatic. When we start thinking about managing our lakes, we need to be able to look through a historical perspective to see what is happening. And so when we start to have problems, we really need to remember the landscape that we live on the shoreline may have been dramatically already changed, which can have consequences that churn up through time. And here's one more image. Here's more of not a marshy shoreline. This is more of where water meets land pretty quickly instead of going through a wetland system. And so what we can see here is that there has been a loss of shoreline. So the shoreline actually has moved in a little bit. And if you look carefully, all of this is actually hardened shoreline. So this is either seawall or rock riprap. And those homes are very close to the water's edge. Oh, I have one more. We'll do it. So this change can be very impactful. And we've seen this in studies with frogs where the higher development, as development gets more and more intense, you lose your frog population. As development gets more intense and you lose vegetation, and become more of a suburban type neighborhood where the lake shoreline looks more like a suburban type landscaping and development. We don't see a loss of the numbers of birds, but we see a change in the species. So you will likely get more robins because they're more of like the suburban bird, and you will lose specialists like the belted kingfisher pictured here because the habitat is no longer there to support their population. And then many fish, the majority of fish, require the littoral zone, that shallow zone of a lake, to have good habitat, and because they spend at some point in their lives, the fish in Michigan spend part of it in the littoral zone. And so we can see dramatic impacts to our fisheries as well. So that was a lot of a bummer. You know, a lot of that is really unfortunate to see. How our actions can impact our water bodies and the other organisms that are in there. But there's no need to be to have a defeatist attitude. There's a lot we can do, and the next half of my presentation is now going to be on what are the different actions that as individuals we can do on our property. And then if us as individuals are doing it, potentially more community actions can be made. But really as individuals, we can make a difference. Because maybe if I put in more trees on my property, it doesn't have the immediate impact, but if multiple people are putting those trees in, that's when our impacts can be seen. So the first thing I want to mention though is if you have it, then keep it. So what I mean by that is if you already have natural vegetation on your property, if you have wonderful shrubs or trees that are native, not invasive, full grown, it'd be great if you can landscape with their presence. So instead of creating a blank canvas and cutting them all down, more of thinking about a landscaping and gardening approach where you blend what you have with what you may need to get down to your dock, for example.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah.
We have a quick question for you from Ralph. How are current high water levels adding to the stresses on inland lake shorelines?
Yeah, so great question, Ralph, and I'll get a little bit of that a little later. However, it is a good time to talk about that. So high water is being seen all around our inland lakes in Michigan, and this caused quite the issue. So if we didn't have a natural shoreline, so you have a typical lawn shoreline, and the water level goes in 8 feet, the problem is that lawn grass is not equipped to handle now the new wave action that is occurring not at the shoreline, but deeper into your property. And so you can get some large amounts of erosion that can occur because there's been no resiliency, is what we call it, no resiliency built into the shoreline. So as the water levels rise, we maybe our house was historically built very close to the water's edge. And now we have a lot of issues with that because of infrastructure. But we can think about one of the things that we need to be concerned about is, so the erosion, like I mentioned, infrastructure, and then our septic systems. So many of our lakes are septic systems. And for them to function well, or I guess even when they're functioning well, they do, depending on soil, they do move nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus into a lake. But now in high water conditions, the water table is likely higher. And we've experienced this for people on the lake that have maybe their basements flooding for the first time. So that's the water table being high. So when the water table gets higher and higher, there may not be a zone of unsat. So I guess a septic system, I'll say, what it is your waste goes into a tank, and then from a tank, it typically goes into a drain field. That's a conventional septic system. That drain field needs about 4 feet in general, of unsaturated soil to be able to remove a lot of the things that are in our waste that are pollutants. But when water tables are higher, that might decrease, and now our septic systems aren't as functional, and we can potentially release harmful bacteria and viruses, or it's now even worse where nitrogen is moving into the groundwater and into the lake much faster. So high water can be can be a very big issue with just those quick things, but there's more. Moving back to
Eric,
good question, Ralph.
I have 2 more
moving
questions
back-
for you, Eric.
Yeah, please.
Sorry. So this one is from Patty.
Shoot.
If the riprap has a smaller angle instead of 90-degree angle, like in the picture, would that be okay?
Excellent observation. So right now, commonly rock riprap is put in on a 2-to-1 slope, which is very steep. It's not 90 degrees, but it's very steep. And so what we prefer for more, to be less damaging, like Patty mentioned, is a 4-to-1 slope. So if rock is used and put in on a 4-to-1 slope, that actually can mimic a lot of the dynamics of a natural shoreline while still anchoring your shoreline soil in place. And I wish I put a diagram of that on here, but there is a way to, a 4-to-1 slope is best, or even shallower. A 3-to-1 slope is still better than a 2-to-1 slope. So I would encourage, if anyone is thinking about rock riprap, is that make that slope as shallow as possible. The state agency, the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, who issue permits, they have made it much easier to get a permit to get rock riprap for a 4-to-1 slope with vegetation added. And so they've now added this kind of practice to their bioengineering permits to help landowners continue to do the right thing. So yes, the shallower the slope. I'll take the next question.
Okay, so this one is, it just says, it might be Carol, but it may be her husband, Cusel. Many riparians are concerned about the effect of wake boats holding heavy ballast on shoreline erosion. Any way to limit these boats on shallow lakes like Spider Lake with a max depth of 35 feet?
Very good question that many lakes around the state are having right now, and not just Michigan, but in lakes all around the country, and actually internationally into Canada. There's currently not enough peer-reviewed scientific literature on the impacts of wake boats. However, there's the eye test, as well as what we know about other larger wave creating boats. And yes, it is amazing what wake boats can do to shorelines and to the lake itself. Now, what can individual lakes do? This is quite tough. There are methods right now for to get no wake times on your lake. So Spider Lake might have this already, where no wake during the early morning, later evening, and into the night. So that at least limits when wake boats and, well, just wake generating boats in general can operate. There are ways that you can get no wake zones. And so already on all Michigan lakes, there's a no wake zone 100 feet out from the shoreline. But there are certain circumstances for safety and other where you can work with your local municipality and the state of Michigan's Department of Natural Resources to start investigating if you could put in a no wake zone that extends further than 100 feet. That might be a tough sell, but if you want some assistance or more background on that, I'd be happy to help get you more information. And then also, and this is where I need to learn a little bit more, is that there has been some legislation that has occurred that due to high water, there are actions that lakes can take that are emergency actions that either I think creates like you can make your lake into a no wake lake. I believe that's the mechanism. So the whole lake goes into no wake because of high water. So if homes are going to be damaged by huge waves coming in, you can, there's these emergency measures. I don't know enough about it, so I hope I was correct with what I said. If you want more information on that, again, email me or email some of the directors of this webinar series and they can pass it on to me and I can get you that information. Now, to regulate just wake boats, I've not heard of any methods currently employed anywhere to limit just wake boats. So I hope that was a long answer. I hope that was helpful. Any other questions?
Not at this moment, Eric. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, and it was great that I was talking about all of those little hard things that are occurring, because as I was showing this beautiful property here. So as you can remember, what I was just talking about was if you have it, then keep it. So preserve that vegetation on your shoreline if you have it. Here's a picture. Here's some pictures of somebody who did just that. So this upper left picture is from their porch looking down into the lake. As you can see, they've kept the vegetation in place entirely except for a path. But as you can see, they still have a beautiful overlook of the lake. They still have full access to the lake with the dock. And so it's not necessarily impeding what they view of what they want. And here's a picture of the property from the lake, and you can see the amount of privacy they have. But again, just how beautiful this property is in that the vegetation isn't a hindrance. This is Pontidaria. Sorry, I do too many. Pontidaria cordata. Well, it's a wonderful flowering, purple flowering plant. And leaving it there doesn't impede any sort of use of this water body, because as you can see, his boat still fits in nicely and he still has full access to the lake. They also did a program called the Shoreland Stewards Program. And this is a online survey that you take. And if you can score a bronze, silver, or gold, and that depends on how natural your lake shoreline and lakefront property is. And if this person got a gold. Something I just wanted, we could do a presentation just on this, but something else is if you have it, then keep it. You can potentially look for conservation easements. So if there are large landowners on your property or on your lake, and that property is undeveloped, and there's a wish to continue to have that undeveloped, there could be interest in putting in a conservation easement. So this is where the land stays in private hands. However, there are restrictions on use that stay with the property. If the conservation easement's forever, it would be in perpetuity. So for example, you can still go on it, fish on it, hunt on it if you wish, but likely what is put in the conservation easement is restrictions on development. So if your lake has large undeveloped properties and there's a wish by the landowner or the lake community to keep it that way in perpetuity forever, a conservation easement is a great way, a great approach to do that, because there's always going to be pressure to develop lakes. I think there's an estimate by 2035 that the majority of Wisconsin's inland lakes will have will be highly developed or something. It's amazing. So the trend of development is continually increasing. But now, what if you don't have it? So what I mean by that is, what if you're on a shoreline property that has lost a lot of its vegetation, historically or currently? Well, what we can do is reintroduce that vegetation and reintroduce and put in certain practices that can help mitigate our impacts. And so that's why I'm going to finish off the presentation now with kind of a nice list and pictures of what we can do. So when we think about each zone, so the upland, buffer, shoreline, and lake, a lot of the designing with nature involves vegetation. Not always, but that's what we're going to look at. So what can we do in the upland? What can we do with buffer? What we can do with the shoreline and lake? And what we'll always be thinking about is how we can utilize nature to help mitigate our impacts. For all zones, I'm going to be broadly covering. Most of them will use native plants. They don't have to. However, native plants improve wildlife habitat. They create a natural beauty that's gives you a sense of, it adds to that sense of place. It decreases and filters runoff. It creates privacy. And then also having tall vegetation on the shoreline and shoreland keeps geese away. Now, just to let you know, if you're doing anything in the water, so below the ordinary high water mark, it is required that you use native plants. Anything above the ordinary high water mark, you are not required to by law, but anything below it, you are required to use native plants. So let's first go into the upland and different practices that we can do. The first one, limit impervious surfaces. So if you can, if you're putting in a new driveway, if you're putting in a new property, or you're doing some remodeling, here the pictures on the left are showing driveways that are not made of impermeable material. So there are pavers out there that are impermeable, which allows water to move through. However, those need to be cleaned, and there's some difficulties with impervious surfaces, or sorry, pervious surfaces that allow water to drain through. This is a different type of method where they use brick or other concrete, patterned concrete, and then they put grass in between, and that allows for more water to soak into the water and soak into the ground instead of running off. If you're thinking about a path, this is the same kind of method where the water will run off of this paver, but it'll enter into the grass in between and give the water a chance to soak into the ground instead of running off. But what if you can't, you already have a large driveway, you're not going to be putting in a impervious or a pervious, a porous driveway anytime soon. Well, then we can do some stormwater management. And the classic one that is becoming more and more common is the rain garden. And so these illustrations are really nice to show kind of what they do. So when precipitation falls on your impervious surfaces, like a driveway or your roof, and going through your rain management system, instead of it running off into a storm drain or into the lake proper or into a stream that runs into the lake, it is where the runoff enters into a rain garden, a depression in the ground, and allows water to soak in. Here's an example of a simple rain garden where your downspout goes into. So like I was mentioning, what is a rain garden? It's a shallow depression that traps, it's designed to hold the first flush of runoff water. So it rains 2 inches, you can design your rain garden to hold that water, and then slowly over the next 48 hours, it's designed to drain completely within 48 hours. The water would go through the soil. And that's important because the biological activity of soil, as well as the plants that are on that soil, can start breaking down that some of the contaminants. It also holds the contaminants before it gets into the lake proper. And it also holds the sediments that would have entered into the lake. All this is helped by deep-rooted plants and usually native, but it doesn't have to be. Here's some pictures of different rain gardens. This one is, you can see how simple a rain garden can be. This is where a rain that you normally would have, but you allow water to pool up there. Here, for example, because we don't want to just talk about what's on our, like near the lake, we need to think about if your lake has stormwater or a lot of roads that go around it, you can collect that water too. Here's a curb cutout, and this goes into the garden. Here's another picture of just how beautiful these native plant rain gardens can be. Let's say plants aren't your forte, or there's just not enough space or whatever, you don't like them. Here's another way you can capture and slowly allow rain or precipitation to soak into the ground. And so this is called rock infiltration pits, where what it is a hole in the ground filled with stone, and then the water enters it and slowly goes into the surrounding soil instead of running off.
Eric, can I interject for just a moment?
Yes, please.
So we had two quick comments that I'll mention. One from Scott, who said regarding the previous discussion that he read an article which stated that wake boat manufacturers are considering putting GPS technology in. And then Ralph had mentioned permits are required by Eagle for work below the ordinary high water mark. And then Kevin had a question. They are on a bay that many, if not all boats pulling tubes, skiers, etc. If we put any kind of plants in, they would be destroyed in short order. Riprap solutions with the 4-to-1 slope cost a lot of money and require major changes to some properties to get materials to the front. Wood barrier walls don't last. What is or are the solution or multiple solutions in this case?
Yeah, so I would explore still that, so if it's a high energy shoreline, there are different engineering solutions that can be built in. So this is going to be a combination of classic engineering with natural shorelines, where we use a bioengineering approach. And potentially, you know, I would say I would look and maybe talk around to different contractors about putting in a 4-to-1 slope or a 3-to-1 slope is expensive. It all depends on your shoreline. So I'd have to see pictures, of course, because it could be really steep and there could be issues there. But there are people who put in a reasonable cost stone in at 4-to-1 slopes. And there's even a nonprofit near your area with Tip of the Mitt who has a lot of expertise in this. And so I'd be curious to know how much that does cost compared to classic 2-to-1 slope rock riprap. But there are other things. Soil lifts is another option if you have a steep shoreline. Soil lifts plus rock
Eric,
at the toe of the slope.
You
Yes.
mentioned that at least 40 feet elevation from street level to the waterfront. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and this is Kevin, is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Kevin, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll give my email address at the end of the presentation. And maybe what we can do is discuss, I can get some pictures from you and we can discuss some options potentially. But yes, so a large drop now can be a very technical project, but I'd be happy to supply you with some options. And Ralph was good to say this, and I'll repeat it. Anything below the ordinary high water mark, so that's kind of, I'll just very simply where the water typically is on a lake through time. Anything below that level requires a state permit through EAGLE, the Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. And so just keeping that in mind, you need to have a permit.
Eric, just another quick comment from someone. I think she meant to say, or maybe she was addressing Kevin, but Barbara had said, please share options online. So perhaps some folks might be looking for some of those potential solutions. If you could share them out to the group.
For sure. Well, yeah, and some of them I can share on a website that's I'll be giving at the end of the presentation. But yes, what we can do, and I'll work with the polls members, is that further resources and stuff, maybe I can make sure to distribute to all participants.
Sounds great.
Okay, moving right along, here's some examples of rock infiltration. I won't go into too much detail because we're going to be running out of time. Here's another example. Another name for them can be a French drain. But as you can see, it can be integrated into a typical landscape, but you can still be doing things that can help water quality. Here's something that I don't see as often as I think I would think I would. Here's a picture of something that we probably have all seen on the left here. So this is a gravel drive that's sloped down to a lake. And as you can see, it erodes. You know, when you get a large rainfall, the fines get eroded away and they create little plumes of sediment into a lake, which is not a good thing. And so a simple engineering project would be a water diversion, or called water bar. And so this is where the slope is going this way. There is a barrier that's angled in. And so you can see that water is coming down, it hits this and then drains off into the vegetation. Sometimes you can put a rain garden right here, or in this picture, they put in a big rock infiltration zone. So water comes down, instead of gaining speed and eroding soil particles away, it hits here before it gains speed and gently gets absorbed by the ground. Here are just some designs that you can imagine. So see, it's not perpendicular, it's angled so that it allows water to move. Moving into buffers. This is now the upland zone that's directly next to the water. Here's a picture of one that can be quite manicured, but it doesn't have to be that way. It can be to your tastes. But a really important design consideration, and I think sometimes we don't talk about this enough, but this is a great time to. As Ralph mentioned, and we mentioned in a question and answer there, is lake levels change. And so right now we're in a level of high water. And so you can see up here, what happens in high water levels? Woody vegetation starts to die off. They don't have the vascular tissue to allow their roots to continue in saturated soil. And so trees and shrubs may die, and you get more emergence growing into this area, and you get plant communities that fluctuate. You get submerged plants that grow higher than they normally would, and emergence growing higher than that. But with receding, what we have is that the woody vegetation can sprout and grow, and we see vegetation, the emergence get larger, space and all that sort of thing. So what it's saying here is, if the design consideration and recommendation is a 35-foot buffer. So what that means is from the shoreline up to have 35 feet of natural shoreline. This 35 feet of shoreline does a lot of things like collect runoff well and filters upland pollutants, but it also allows the shoreline to change with the changing water instead of having it run into a lawn, which then it would erode. And it's because these diverse shorelines with a bunch of different kinds of plants can cope with the stresses and move with the changing waters. So just really important to think about lake level fluctuations when you're designing your shoreline. Here's an example. The next few examples I'm going to show you don't have 35-foot shoreline, but I would say that anything is better than nothing. So don't feel that because you can't make 35 feet doesn't mean that you shouldn't put some sort of buffer. Here's a steep shoreline where they have native plants growing here, and then this is a shrub, a typical horticultural shrub at the top to give itself a nice look. Here's a shoreline that's more about how simple one could be. This is just a no-mow zone. They decided to stop mowing the land right next to the water, and they had Joe Pyeweed come up, and this is probably Canada goldenrod and a few other species. So although not even close to 35 feet, it's still better than nothing. Here's an example of no-mow zone with a native planting. And so here's the no-mow zone. They decided not to do landscaping here at all, and then they did some plantings up front. As you can see, still full access, because we never want to design something that then precludes us from getting to the water. That's why we live on the lake. So to blend in our needs with the lake's needs is important. Here's an example of a project being put in where this area is the lawn is being removed and native plants are being planted into it. It's then using this thing called a core log that's going across here. And that's biodegradable coconut material that helps keep the shoreline in place to allow the plants to grow. And then this is a temporary wave break. So don't be concerned, you'd say, I'd never want that ugly thing there. This is just temporarily there because they planted into the shallow part of the lake, and to allow plants to grow there, this will be removed once the plants are established. So let's blend into that shoreline zone and talk a little bit more. So if you have I might need to be using bioengineering techniques, which is the use of native plants and biodegradable material, and sometimes rock, all blended together. What we try to do is we're engineering to mimic natural shorelines, but the shoreline just needs a little bit more help to keep the soil in place. Here's an example of a before and after. So this is what the shoreline looked like, and this is immediately after aquatic plants were installed. So here's the coconut fiber log that's holding, that's going to hold the soil in place enough for these plants to grow up, and then they'll be the ones holding the soil in place. Here's an example of a blending of common and natural shoreline practices. So here's that wooden wall that we would not recommend, but this person has slowly been putting in kind of the typical horticultural plants up here, and then they're putting in a natural shoreline in front of a lot of their other things. So you don't have to, one approach isn't perfect for everybody. Instead, blending can be a great solution. The lake zone. So the one important thing, if you listen to Dr. Joe Latimore's presentation at the beginning of this webinar series, aquatic plants do a whole lot. And so one of the things that you can do for the shoreline area or the lake zone is to protect those aquatic plants. Of course, you still may want a beach and you still want to get access with your boat, but it's more of if you have a 100-foot shoreline, there's probably no need to remove aquatic plants from the entire 100-foot of shoreline. Instead, just do the places you need. So if you want to remove plants, do it in moderation. Because aquatic plants do a tremendous amount, and we probably learned a lot about this with Joe Latimore's presentation. Aquatic plants stabilize sediments, they reduce turbidity, they absorb wave energy, they mitigate shoreline erosion, they're valuable habitat, they are refuge for fish, and they produce oxygen for the lake. And that's just a few of the things that they do. And they're beautiful. Yes.
One quick question we had from Cheryl is there a way to make a core log on your own, like a do it yourself?
Yes. However, it might take a little bit of trial and error. So you can get biodegradable coconut fiber blankets, and in those blankets you can wrap up and woody shrubs that you can pack into it and then tightly create a sausage and place in. The problem is that you have to be really careful to make them tight. using other material. So why coconut is used is because it's inert. It has no nutrients. It really is, there's nothing to it. It's not going to cause any issues. It's not going to add a bunch of nutrients. And it also slowly degrades through the years. So Cheryl, I would say yes, and I could give, since we're kind of running out of time, I think I'd be happy to chat with you a little bit more about that. There are some options, but you have to be careful. So here's a nice little animation that Eagle and the Michigan Natural Shoreline Partnership. Let's see if I can do it. There we go. Shows. So here is higher wave energy coming into a shoreline. And what we see is the aquatic plants absorbing the wave energy, and by the time it makes it to the shoreline, the wave energy is much less. And so that's the importance of having plants in the zone for shoreline protection. Talk very briefly about downwoody debris. Here's a depiction of the project called Fish Sticks from the Wisconsin Healthy Lakes program. Downwoody debris is really important for habitat, and also it creates, this also absorbs wave energy, and which helps aquatic plants grow, which again helps more wave energy dissipation. So this is another way you can mitigate wave energy, is to have downed trees in front of your shoreline. Here's an underwater photo of what that is, and wonderful habitat, wonderful habitat. By the way, if you want to do a fish sticks type project, that is, you need a permit for that. Kind of now rounding out things, there's a whole lot we can do. I just blitzed through different ideas, but there could be a whole lot more. It could be stopping to not fertilizing your grass anymore. It could be putting in a rain barrel. It can be improving your septic system. There's a whole lot of things. But when we think about what we can do as individuals, there's a lot. And it's helpful to think about what we can do in the upland, buffer, shoreline, and lake. And collectively, if we do things, it can create quite a difference. Here's a picture of somebody who's put in the upland area where they removed much of their lawn. They still keep part of their lawn, of course, because they want to see the lake. They want to be a part of their lake. But they understood that they had too much lawn, and so they put in native vegetation and trees and shrubs. They have a buffer, and they have a species, an emergent species in front of their property. But instead of removing all of it, they just remove what's necessary for them to get through. So I've been talking a lot about different examples and different techniques and different plants. You can find a tremendous amount of information from the Michigan Natural Shoreline Partnership. You can just type that into Google and it'll get you to our website, but I did put our website down here as well. We have many different programs. If you want to learn more about how to do certain things, we also have programs that are specific for shorelines, where it's a day-long workshop, and a whole lot more. The Michigan Natural Shoreline Partnership is very active, and so you can find a lot of information on there. And I'd recommend anyone who's doing things on shorelines to check out that website. But throughout my presentation, I also showed pictures and different design considerations from the Wisconsin Healthy Lakes program. So that is geared towards Wisconsin, the program itself. However, they have wonderful designs that they provide on their website that we can adopt over here. And so feel free to, if you type in Wisconsin Healthy Lakes program to Google, that'll get you there, or it's healthylakeswi.com. And you can take a peek at all of their things as well. Something that's coming up, I can't end this presentation without talking about an amazing 3-day inland lake conference that's occurring this September. Oh, I forgot to put the date. I think it's September 16th is the first day, but it's an online convention. So it's 3 days of workshops, of presentations, of network building, all about inland lakes. So if anyone is interested, you can register today, type in the Michigan Inland Lakes Convention into Google, and that should get you there. Or you can write down this website here, which is pretty lengthy. I apologize. But if anyone needs that link, please let me know. The registration is open now. And if there is interest in expanding and talking to your neighbors and kind of an initiative to put in better shoreline practices and best practices, there's a new document that the Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership has created with a bunch of partners called Shoreline Living. It's a magazine that we developed, and you can find it all online. A bunch of the pictures that I used throughout this presentation were from that program. If you type in the Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership, that will get you to their website. Go to resources and you will find it there. You can print it freely, and if you want a print copy, there's a person you contact that there'll be a charge, but it's minimal because we are printing a large amount of them. And if you're curious to learn a little bit more about this, this document, again, you can email me. So thank you very much. I hope this was helpful, enjoyable, and also I hope that it wasn't an overload of negative. You know, yes, we can we have an impact on our lakes, but we can do a lot of things that can mitigate those negative impacts. Thank you very much. Are there any more questions?
Yes, thank you so much, Eric. That was great. We have a question from Ralph. His question is, high water levels create challenges for constructing natural shorelines. Should we wait for the levels to go down before starting natural shoreline projects or move forward now?
Well, that is a tough question. There's some shoreline specifics here, you know, depending on the property, but actually the high water is an opportunity to some degree. So if your infrastructure is not getting impacted, you can start putting certain things in place. So for example, one of the things that has occurred is that high water level has, say, flooded into a person's lawn away from infrastructure, away from the house. They've now put in a core log at the edge of that water level now, just a little bit back from it. And what this person has decided, they actually don't mind having this kind of expansion of a littoral zone that's naturally occurring in front of their eyes. And they can still keep, there are certain things that you can do, like a boardwalk and stuff that would be able to get permitted. Talk to Eagle, of course. And you can take it, you can do it now. Now, if you're having a large amount of shoreline problems prior to this high water and you're getting large amounts of erosion or so on and so forth, there might be reason to wait. But I would say before you make that decision, feel free to contact, you can contact me, you can contact Eagle. They have water permitting staff all around the state who are great to brainstorm with. You can find contacts at the Michigan Natural Shoreline Partnership as well, who might be able to help you make that decision. So I would encourage people, there is some depends, but I don't think having high water does discourage you from doing things on the shoreline now.
Great. Do we have any other questions for Eric before we wrap things up? Cheryl mentioned that the Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership is offering grant money.
Yeah, so that grant is open right now. You can go to the Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership website, and you could. There are projects that you will have to. I would encourage you to find a conservation organization to work with. You don't have to, but that might be helpful to write this grant. But they are looking to fund lake projects to help fish habitat. And what's great is what helps fish habitat also helps our shorelines often, or it helps just the general water quality of our lakes.
Cheryl asked, will this work for Avery Lake?
Hi, Cheryl. It's great to hear from you. It's great to hear from people I know and see on this call. Cheryl, you can reach out to me and we can chat about that depending on what kind of project you're thinking. And there's an individual within the Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership who leads it, who is here in Michigan DNR, and he was the previous speaker, Dr. Joe Noner with the DNR. He leads that program, and chatting with him might be worthwhile as well.
All right. If you have any other questions, type them in the chat box, but we're running low on time here, so I'm going to pass things off to Patty for a few words. So Patty, take it away.
Hi, like she said, I'm Patty Hershberger, and I'm part of the Spider Lake, Runny Lake team that helped organize the polls series. We're glad that you were able to join us today, and we hope that our polls team was able to share information about some of the complex issues and our lake bank erosion and some preventative strategies you may find useful in and around your lake property. We were so fortunate to have Dr. Erick Elgin with us today in webinar format, and appreciate his sharing not only of his personal time, but also his vast knowledge and methods to protect Michigan's shorelines and shorelands. And to show our appreciation, the team would like to present Dr. Elgin with this year's Advice from a Lake t-shirt from Your True Nature store. A tree has also been purchased and will be donated into a very deserving area. So the poem on this year's t-shirt reads, I don't know if you can see it, be clear, make positive ripples, look beneath the surface, stay calm, shore up friendships, take time to reflect, and be full of life. So Eric, you will be receiving one of these in your mail.
I love it. I love it. I love both things. And that.
Thank you so much.
And I really hope that tree is planted near a shoreline.
I'm sure it will be. And now I'll turn it over to Carol.
Thank you.
Uh-oh, did we lose it? Uh-oh.
Carol, we can't hear you. Yep, you're on mute still, it looks like.
Let's see.
Lauren, you can, there we go. Carol, you should be unmuted now.
Can you hear me?
Excellent.
Yes.
Okay, sorry for the technological problems this morning. Patty, you did great filling in. Lauren, thank you so much for...
Oh no, you cut out again.
Patty, take over.
Oh, we can hear you now.
I'm so sorry. It must be those dog days of summer. Turn it into a storm or something. Anyways, Lauren, thank you. Patty and Ralph, thank you. Eric, thank you so much. I don't think that your presentation was a bummer in any way. It was presenting the facts that we have a complex system of land and water and everything that grows and lives in those areas. And we as humans need, as you said, to learn how to blend our needs with the lake's needs. And you've certainly given us a whole package of things that we can do, and many resources to go to learn more. And yes, we do have challenges with the high waters and more powerful artificial wakes, but we can still do something. On your screen right now is a list of the previous polls presentations that happened and some other work that's available from the Grand Traverse Conservation District. So after this seminar is over, if you haven't seen the other poll series, go to the Grand Traverse Conservation District and click on those videos there. I have a feeling I'll be going there just to listen to the suggestions and the resources that Eric's given us today to go back to that and get that information. While you're at the Conservation District website, please consider making a donation to them to help them continue the programs they're doing to help our area and to continue to provide webinars like ours or on-site, hopefully in the future, on-site programs to educate people. If you're not with the Grand Traverse Conservation District, go to your own conservation district and see what they offer. Lastly, in the tradition of our poll series, we like to present a takeaway. And from the poem on the lake shirt, the one that's most appropriate, the line or the takeaway that's most appropriate for today is make positive ripples. So take some of the information you learned today, even if it's just one thing, plant a tree, plant a native bush, plant a native flower, decrease your runoffs, one little thing. Do that on your property, share the information with your neighbors, and together making small ripples will make bigger ripples, and not the ones that hurt our shorelines, the ones that protect it. So go enjoy summer, go enjoy your favorite watering place. Thank you for attending. Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Lauren.
Yes, absolutely. We did have a couple of other questions that came in at the very end there, but maybe I can type in your email address into the chat box, Eric, real quick, and perhaps folks can email those questions to you since we're running out of time.
Yes, feel free to do that.
All right, could you maybe just say it for me and I'll...
Here, I can, I'll just type in my...
Okay, that works. And Kurt, I don't know if you saw my message back to you, but yeah, I just on the east end, so of Hubbard Lake. But congrats to your son on his wedding out there. That's great.
Excellent. And yes, and so for sometimes these are complicated issues. So your questions, what we can do, please email me and we can find a time to talk. I'm happy to discuss, and sometimes that's more efficient and effective to have a phone conversation. So I'm happy to do that. And you can email me and we can schedule that time.
Great. Well, thank you guys. Thank you, Eric, and everybody in the polls group, and for all of our participants. And I suppose we'll all say goodbye. Thanks, Carol, for the ending message.
Thank you, everyone.